Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, I'm your host. My name is Fred Reiser. I'm with SNP Group. We are a data migration company, and I'm pleased to present to you today the Domtar story. And we have our friends here from Wipro, Domtar, and SNP. I'll ask each of them to introduce themselves, and we'll start with Abe.
My name is Abhay Khanore. I'm a director of ERP applications in Domtar. Working with Domtar for last 20 years, mainly involved in all the ERP operations as well as projects involved in various ERPs. We have multiple ERPs, homegrown, legacies, SAP, JD Edwards, you name, and we have everything. And we have been supporting them and working on those projects for last 20 years.
Thank you, Tarun. And Tarun, next.
Thank you, Fred. So my name is Tarun Khanna, and I'm responsible for our recipe solutions from Wipro for all customers in Canada. Thank you.
Yeah. And Fabian.
All right, thanks. Yeah, my name is Fabian Fau. I'm responsible here in North America for the solutioning of the SNP offerings, and with SNP for the last 15 years, and looking forward to present you today's story of our customer, Domtar.
Thanks, gentlemen. And just as we get started, just if anyone has any questions, just please raise your hand or get my attention, and we'll address questions as we go. But to kick us off, Tarun, I'd like to ask, can you describe Domtar's business drivers for this carve-out?
In 2021, Paper Excellence and Domtar made a business deal where Paper Excellence was acquiring Domtar. And as a part of that deal, the Competition Bureau from Canada asked us to sell off one of our mill in Kamloops Mill in Canada. And that was really mandated by government requirements to carve out a mill in a very specific time. And that was a trigger for this project to start with.
And what was the scope of the divestiture?
So when we were selling a mill, our responsibility was to ensure we hand over a fully functional mill to the buyer who is buying that. That means all the systems which are required to run that mill, right from order to cash to the mill floor, that needs to be carved out and given to the new buyer. That was the main scope. This was from the IT perspective. From a business perspective, we were to train and ensure that the production activities as well as the sales from that mill continues even after the go live.
Were there any other business constraints other than the ones you just mentioned?
When the project started, we were not knowing who the buyer is. So when the mandate came from Competition Bureau, we immediately started forming the team without knowing who is going to buy. And with that, we started working. First 3-4 months of the project, we did not know who is the buyer. Once the buyer was announced, then we started getting requirements as the new buying company. So to anticipating that this is a challenge, Domtar decided to carve out the Kamloops Mill as a legal entity of its own, not knowing who is the buyer. So we prepared ourselves by making sure that we have a legal entity for which we can start working. In spite of that, when the buyer came in, they started asking their logo, their addresses, their head office. So these details came very late in the game. And this was one of the biggest challenges we had throughout the project, not knowing what needs to be carved out on the day one.
So, Tarun, these sound like fairly typical carve-out challenges, but some unique challenges here as well. How did you design the program?
Yeah, it was very interesting, and you know, we essentially focused on the long poles in the tent when we were designing the program. Like we figured out that there are 3 big things which are happening here. One, Abhay just mentioned that we didn't know the buyer. So the way buyer would like to see legal entities shaped at that point in time, we didn't know that ahead of time, right? We didn't know. So we had to plan for that to be accommodated. So that was the flexibility piece, which was one long pole in the tent. The other one would be from a data perspective, because now this was a divestiture. Now, how do you cleanly carve out, both from a timeline perspective, from how much history do you want to carry, plus how do you cut the finance books, right? How do you do the period end closures in both companies? So that was a big thing. The third long pull was around the testing, that that much of this program will focus on the testing that we'll need to build around it. So we prepared a parallel financial period and close testing in the old environment and the net new environment. So these were the three long poles that we had to put into the program design, so that we are covered for the big items to begin with.
And I assume you needed to get off to a really quick start. So how did you build the momentum, or how did you staff up to meet those challenges?
Yeah, so it's staffing is underplayed. It's a problem widely known, but not attended with enough amount of attention on how you really come around and make it happen. At Wipro, we've given enough focus on this, and we have an initiative called as Top Gear, and wherein we bring in a subset of team very quickly on board. They focus on essentially the design and the testing strategy ahead of the time, which essentially gives us a lot of foresight into what's coming at us. It also engages the SMEs who have a wealth of knowledge ahead of time, and that eases out all the pressure downstream for the team who will actually come on board 2-3 weeks later to build and do the unit testing, etc., because much of what is to be done is known well ahead of time. Banking, for example, was one long pole in the tent we had to attend to, and because of the early design, we could talk about the interfaces which were banking interfaces, and so that the team which came on board later was able to attend to those better.
Very good. Fabian, obviously the SNP had a role in this divestiture. Can you tell us a little bit about who SNP is and what we do?
Sure, Fred. So SNP is a company founded in 1994 in Heidelberg, and we're focusing in the SAP market on data and transformational aspects. That for us primarily is the migration of data from one system to another, and in this particular case, from an M&A perspective, from the current system into a new separate instance. We do so by providing a combination of software and services in order to enable our clients to be faster and more accurate in those challenges.
Can you speak a little bit more about how SNP specifically handles divestitures like this and the challenges associated with it?
All right, sure. Yeah, I can go a little bit more into detail. So basically, the way how we do this is that we have our software which provides automation in the data migration space. So we come to a project fully fledged with our about 800 data migration objects, so we can configure this to the customer's needs in order to accompany the finance, the controlling, the material management, all the different objects which they have in the system. And we do this with an expert set of consultants together with our partners, and eventually, using the software, provide an outcome to the client where our clients then, like in the case of Domtar, do get a very fast-paced project. They quickly get to a system which is fully functional, compared to when you do this in a classical approach where you bring over a couple of line items, where you do open items and where you do master data first. We do a full load of the data at that particular mock. So for every mock cycle, you got a full set of data, and I think that enables a great way of testing. And
Indeed.
that with that testing, right, you very early in the stage have a good feeling about the outcome of the actual
That did give a
migration.
confidence to many of our business users, because they saw the complete data right from the first mock itself, and they were able to correct if there are any corrections required, and we fine-tune the overall data migration as we go along.
Abhay, since you have the mic, why don't you, what were some of the unique IT architecture challenges that you faced?
So when we identified initially, there were more than 30 IT systems which were needed to carve out on a specific day. Now, as you know, any IT project, just going live with one system itself takes a lot of toll on the IT department. Having 30 systems to be carved out on any given day was a big challenge for us. So we identified which are the major systems out of that, and SAP was one of them. Our order management system, which is a homegrown legacy system, that was another one. Luckily for us, Wipro has been maintaining, and Wipro is our AMS partner for that system. It was an easy decision for us to go and approach Wipro to take their help. Knowing that SAP will be more complicated and historical data is required to be extracted for last 30 years of that mill, since the inception of the mill, because all the machines which are running, from a regulation point of view, we need to get history maintained till the time that machine is there. So that history needed to be taken out. So we requested Wipro to find a partner who could really help us. And in that, we came across with SNP, which really worked out at the end very well. So this was one of the biggest IT consideration just before even starting the project. Now, the legacy system, because we have developed that ourselves, we knew the architecture completely, and it is not having a financial module implemented, we were able to follow one strategy with that. We could do our own scripts to extract data and move into the new system. Whereas with SAP, we followed completely different strategy suggested by SNP. And that's how we really tackled the bigger blocks at the beginning. As we move along the progress, means we made the progress in this project, we realized there are few objects which we have missed. And then we had a good discussion with our colleagues in SNP. We added those in the list of objects which we need to extract. Overall, everything worked out well.
Very good. And Tarun, what were some specific challenges that Wipro faced in this?
Yeah, so see, one of the things we observed was that, like Abhay was mentioning, there were different applications. Different applications required to be planned or handled differently. There was no one-size-fits-all approach possible at all, even be it from historical data perspective, from a carve-out perspective, or from a testing perspective. We had to, it was, that particular one was very unique challenge, so we had to take one application at a time and figure out what the strategy would be.
Mm-hmm. And this question is for both Abhay and Tarun. What kind of risks did you think you faced, and how did you mitigate those?
So one of the biggest risks, as we discussed in the beginning, the buyer was not known to us. So almost considerable duration of this project, we didn't know the buyer. And we have to prepare not knowing the buyer till last minute. So we, as I mentioned in the beginning, Domtar created legal entities upfront, not knowing who is the buyer, and we actually handed over that legal entity to the new buyer, and then they finally started using it. We created bank accounts on their name with the new legal entity. And that was one of the critical path items. Typically, bank integrations, specifically the EDI, takes a long time. This is our historical experience. So opening bank accounts early in the game in the name of the new legal entity resolved that issue, and we were able to establish connections with the banks so that we can have a fully functional EDI communication for all the partners, including bank, on the day one. So from a business perspective, we try to identify all the hurdles ahead of the time. Mm-hmm. In spite of that, it does happen that the buyer, when it was declared, they were not ready to start the carve-out on the day when we decided. And we have to push the whole project by 1 month because the buyer was not ready to close the deal. Mm-hmm. And we have to prepare ourselves that changing the gear and making sure that we retest when the buyer is ready. That was another challenge we faced from a business perspective.
Maybe the other risk, worth mentioning is on the data front, right? So yes, we knew that we had to carve out Kamloops specific business, but to get to the plant level detail, to get to the company level detail, to find out those exact master data elements that needed to be carved out, and that's where SNP did a fabulous job, getting us past that hurdle and make it seamless. So because there are so many integrated systems in any typical packaged application software, SAP is known for it too. So it wasn't easy, but then I think the product, SNP's product, made it easy.
So Fabian, based on the approaches and the risks and so forth, what can you add about the value that SNP brings to a program like this?
Yeah, Fred, I mean, I think that's a good question, right? If we reflect a little bit what we heard from Tarun and Abhay, One thing which from our perspective is pretty important is the operational continuity for our clients. So what I mean by this is a divestiture itself is disruptive enough. So then if you have on the IT side and on the systems a disruption because you cannot bring over the historical data, like Abhay said, there's a requirement to have the possibility to access data for your machines, for your plant maintenance data, right? In the plant itself, and now if I do a carve-out and would only bring open items balances and would lose the historical data, I would have to go back to an old system or to printouts all the time in order to find that out whenever I have a maintenance on a machine. That being said, if you go to approach and basically have the possibility with the software bringing historical data, makes a huge difference. On top of that, when you bring that, also testing is for the business easier. We talked about the fact that you wanted to have the banks connected, right? But from a master and transactional data perspective, bringing also the open orders and everything over makes it easier for the business as well, even if you have the closed ones over. So it's not only in the maintenance space, but it's also in the other modules like in the material management, where it's good to have the historical documents over. Needless to say, if you would do this all manually, and if you were going down a route where you would have done it internally, then you don't have the seamless data integration / migration that Tarun talked about, because you have to then put your own resources on the project, which would then create an individual solution, which Domtar would have used for that particular project, and then maybe not needed it anymore in the near distant future. Here, we brought in a software. They focused on bringing the requirements to the Wipro and SNP team, and we were then able, based upon those requirements and the standard software with about 800 migration objects configured to the scope needed, to really quickly do the data migration. I think that is really where you can rethink the M&A process from a very lengthy and painful process to, if the business decides it, let data not stop you, right? We're able to get this out of the system quickly in the interest of seller and buyer.
That's very good. And this, again, Abhay and Tarun, can you describe at cutover how did that go? What were some of the challenges? What was the actual go live like?
So cutover was an interesting challenge actually. We were carving out systems from a fully functional system supporting 20 different mills. So even though we are selling one mill, there are 19 remaining mills which were to run continuously. And this system supports 24/7 operations at the paper mills and pulp mills. So having a downtime of a few hours was really a challenge. There was no real agreement from business that they would allow system to be down for that long. So we have to come up with strategy in a way that the remaining mill will be able to function immediately with a very brief interruption. Whereas Kamloops, we could take a little bit more time because there we had to convert and migrate data over a period of time. To handle this problem, SNP and Domtar Wipro worked together to create a copy of entire disk upfront when we are taking system down. And from that copy we started working, whereas we return the system to the rest of the users immediately. So that way we did not have unhappy users from 19 different mills. Now regarding Kamloops, the way we did that, production supposed to be continued 24/7, even though on the cutover day. We did not stop production, we did not lose a minute. So the manufacturing system, which is specifically at the MES level, we had ensured over a period of time that that instance of MES is running at the mill. So we could just change the name of the company there and be able to print documents immediately. So the MES system was down only for 20 minutes. And after that, they were able to use. So machine was still running. We took a break of 20 minutes and we handed over the machine. So production did not stop. And then we brought in the order management system within 8 to 9 hours. SAP was the long pole, took almost 40 hours because we had to migrate a lot of data. Historical data for last 30 years was to be migrated. So it took long time. However, mill did not lose one customer order. They did not lose 1 minute of production time. And that was the beauty of this cutover.
Tarun, anything to add?
Yeah, I think bulk, Abhay covered on. I'd just like to add that, the recipe of success there was really in the preparation, right? So the way the mocks were designed, the way the approach was designed was, practiced. right? And so that gave a lot of confidence in what downtime we are expecting, and then that was being relayed easily to the business also, that there is a comfort ahead of time, that is there are least amount of unknowns. And so that bit was good. And typical standard practices of cutover, team being team being available 24/7 during a production cutover, etc. SNP team was completely in lockstep on, we were prepared. We had a plan B too. So
It sounds like there were a lot of business challenges, a lot of IT challenges, a lot of data challenges, and a plan that was well executed. So congratulations on that. Fabian, do you have any recommendations before we wrap up on what other customers should think about if they're facing similar situations?
Sure, Fred, sure. Being in that space for an extended period of time, I think we heard a couple of good advices here from the colleagues. I'd like to just add, essentially, if you do the M&A piece, don't underestimate the IT side of it, okay? It is pretty easy to sign a contract or have even your business waiting whilst they are not giving, deciding, and the IT doesn't know where to go. But the earlier the IT is involved, the better it works. Like we saw here, IT did their job of going through the process of starting the disintegration even before knowing the buyer. That's the right thing to do. Don't wait until that's done, because if you do, then you have probably a very short window of the TSA. So that's a very good one. So engage the IT early from a business perspective. So for everybody in the audience here who is from a business perspective, talk to your IT guy early. And from an IT side, look at what you need. Think about historical data early. We talked about the benefit of having historical data available to the buyer, particularly in a logistics space, in a plant maintenance space. If that is something you need, then look at integrating. Reach out to Tarun, reach out to SNP. We're able to help from our perspective with bringing that historical data over so that you have a cohesive system and no disruption. And last but not least, when it comes to downtime, we just heard about, downtime itself is critical for most of the businesses. So thinking about a data migration strategy which provides you a very short downtime, even for large data volumes, right? As you can see over here in the back, it's 50 terabyte, even for large data volumes. That's something where it's important to make sure you have the right data migration software in place. And we're here to help. So from an S&P perspective, just reach out to us.
Well, very good. Gentlemen, thank you for your time this afternoon. Fabian, Atbay, Tarun, sounds like this was a very good partnership. Everyone worked well together. So congratulations to you all for a well-executed program. And thanks, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate your time and look forward to doing this again.